Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. In the previous episode we saw a battle against Persia as Cretius's forces went up against Persia's elite army, their main force struggling to beat them but eventually finding a decisive victory. We found that our ally cultures had conquered much of Hyastan's territories, including ones that we need ourselves for victory. The Nervii main force sallied out and was defeated by Bendis and Eutychus in combination, so Nervii are pretty much destroyed. We saw a very fast battle as Artemios took down a Hyastan garrison in prompt timing, but right after that we were betrayed by Arachosia and Artemios was attacked in the rear. Luckily his army was in great condition after that battle, so he was able to just about grind out a victory against the enemy's amazing heavy infantry using his superior maneuvering ability. So now let's continue. The fierce fighting across the world was starting to take a small toll on the strength of the Republic. Not only were elite troops beginning to stall against the increasingly sophisticated methods of their enemies, but many of the extremely powerful personalities were waning in health. Cretius, Bendis and Heraclides, three figures who each appealed to their own political demographic, were all past the age of 70. The younger generals, Acronius, Artemios, Eurysthenes and Epaphroditos, all lacked the fame, conviction and skill of the previous generation of pioneers. The loss of the leading figures of Massalian life was thus likely to produce a dangerous power vacuum that would hamper their progress at the very least. So here's the aftermath of the Daemon's battle with Arachosia. Our forces pretty damaged actually, some of our frontline heavy infantry going down into the red after that fight, but Arachosia's army massively damaged, going to move away with just a few regiments left. Now immediately after this we have a decision. Cimbri, our client state, is being attacked by the Gallic Confederation, our ally, and a long time ago one of our big enemies. So I need to make a decision here. I can either cancel the client state agreement or I can attack the Gallic Confederation, and I was thinking I would go for the latter option, especially because the Cimbri have been so good to me and because the Gallic Confederation are allies to the Nervii, which is quite cheeky. And immediately, probably because they had this planned, they attack one of my settlements. I think this is Trevorum, and inside it we have only a small garrison. Not completely out of the question that we could win this battle, but I decided not to bother trying. I think it would be quite unlikely, especially with only 2 units of regular hoplites, considering the enemy's force is full of chosen swordsmen who just cut apart the militia hoplites. So unfortunately, we're going to give up that settlement to the Gallic Confederation. Good for them, because I think that actually unifies their home province for themselves, but annoying. They also take a Cimbri settlement right away, so a good start for the Gallic Confederation in this war, so we're going to have to see what we can do to reply to that. First, we're going to jump back over to Artemios. He's now conquered that settlement because it's surrendered, so he's now jumping inside, and you can see this province is full of armies, and importantly, many of them are hostile. We've got an Arachosian main force and a Persian main force right outside the settlement. The Persian main force, which you can see, is looking pretty powerful, lots of thorax legionaries in there. This is actually really dangerous. With the Daemons damaged like that, fighting another elite army could be challenging. I'm going to give Artemios these level ups to increase his replenishment speed, so if we can just get 1 or 2 turns without a fight, we will be back to full strength. I'm going to try and get peace with Arachosia to make it easier for me, but they actually refused it, and that's a massive shame considering they have 1.5 or so stacks in the area. That's going to increase the danger level yet further. So now let's look at the situation with the Gallic Confederation. There's their army that just took Trevorum from us. They've basically got this little triangle of 3 settlements, and also they've got Alabu right up at the top of the map there, but I'm not hugely concerned about going to take that for myself. Perhaps the Cimbri will do that. As for the Nervii, they're pretty much out. They've got 1 settlement left, no armies, and the Cimbri are marching on them right now, so really we can ignore the Nervii at this stage. We've taken their last remaining main settlement, and we're now going to move these forces, Eutychus and Bendis, to redeploy against the Gallic Confederation. Good timing, I guess. So first, Eutychus is going to head on a northerly route towards the always hilariously named Bangacum, and Bendis is going to go on a more southerly route towards Trevorum to try and take it back. We've also got Heraclides to use here, and interestingly, there's actually a Gallic Confederation army encamped right next to him and next to the settlement, so it seems they were planning something but gave up at the last moment. Heraclides can challenge them. The balance bar's pretty far in our favour, and I thought we might as well try and get an auto-resolve here, but actually the percentages looked pretty bad, so I'm going to cancel cancel that for a second, we'll come back to it though. First I had the idea of trying to get Bactria to join our war with either Persia or Arachosia, because they have forces near Artemios. They might be able to back him up, and that could be very useful. Unfortunately, even for gigantic sums of money, they weren't interested in going to war with either of those factions, so Bactria have let me down a little bit there, unfortunately. Now jumping back to Heraclides, I decided to do a slightly exploitative move. We're going to recruit a little mercenary army, interestingly called the Heraclidae by default, which I thought was nice. And because we now have those mercenaries in reinforcement range, and auto-resolve is so dependent on numerical advantage, that allows us to get an 80% auto-resolve, and I thought that's satisfactory for the situation. So we bring down that main force. Unfortunately, our losses actually seem to be quite heavy, perhaps a little bit more than 80%, I think. All these legionaries taking so many losses is a shame, because they are Heraclides' main troops. I mean, we're going to have to wait maybe 1 or 2 turns before he'll be able to do something more effective. We're probably going to want that full army before we head north to attack the enemy settlement with half a stack inside. So what I'm going to do for now is just move up to the border there and fortify. The enemy are too weak probably to come out and actually break through that border, so we've got enough forces to defend it, but we'll wait before we go on the offensive. So as we move on, the Iceni end their defensive alliance with me. That is both a shame and a little bit suspicious. In Britannia we have no armies right now, so if they want to betray us, this would be a great time to do it, and perhaps they know about this because they're going that way. Archabosphorus seem to be moving forces down towards Sarai, perhaps intending to come down and support Artemios, but they're a little bit too late. Artemios is in trouble right now. All of those armies attack at once. The Persians were in reinforcement range, and that means when Arachosians attacks, we have to face all of those armies at once. Luckily Bactria and Parthia are there, you see in the background, not getting involved. But for the Daemons of Polymus, this is an extremely dangerous situation. Their army still damaged from the previous battle, no movement points to escape, are trapped inside the settlement, and the enemy now coming at us with 2.5 elite armies full of legionaries and thorax hoplites. There's also elite pelters, cavalry, and catapults coming from Persia. Overall, this is an extremely powerful army, so this is going to be probably the most difficult battle the Daemons of Polymus have ever had to face. This is tragedy. We starve a settlement into submission, meaning we have no supplies with which to move, forcing us to just watch the enemy surround us with armies more metal than man. I can only curse myself that I am not Eusebius, for he would have bargained a peace with Arachosia without trouble, I have no doubt. So this, then, is the day when the sum of my mistakes is totaled. The day when the Daemons, for all their courage and skill, finally see that belief in one's strength takes only so much hold in reality. I feel like the great master Xenon today, having marched so far only to face betrayal, deceit, and half the world in arms against me. So then, let us form up, and show the gods what we will make of their tragedy. So our tiny garrison and the Daemons of Polymus are forming up for this gigantic battle, blocking the choke points, entering towards the victory point. They're making a massive noise as this battle gets started. They are fired up for this fight that is definitely going to define their campaign here in the east. Artemios waiting in the center to be used as a reserve, standing in the second rank, or a defensive position for a general in this day and age. So we'll see how Artemios gets on in this fight himself. We've also got pikemen at the back of our little position. There's these annoying steps, so we've got the pikes stopping anyone rear flanking us down those steps. To start with, it's just their initial army, the survivors of the previous battle with Arachosia, and they're going to attack right away without waiting for reinforcements, so that's going to help us out a fair bit as things get going. They almost charged their general into this line of hoplites. This line is all of the garrison hoplites rather than the Daemons themselves. Unfortunately, they didn't actually do that general charge. They did stop and go on to make an infantry charge, more logical. But because they're kind of coming in on their own, they've attracted the attention of basically all of our missile units, including my reserve missile units there in the centre. So they're going to have arrows raining down upon them, and even these javelin men who were positioned to support the Daemons are going to cheekily throw backwards into this melee, a very long throw, but they're making it and cutting these enemies down. So that's very nice, and their general then does plough in to fight with the hoplites, so that's fantastic news, and he's actually very quickly defeated there. You can see his horsemen escaping from the melee as the last of his infantry start to come in there. Some thorax legionaries joining the fight, very powerful. So we've done a lot of damage to the enemy, lots of blood on the ground, lots of dead enemies, especially among their lesser units. A couple of their units came round to fight the actual daemons here as these legionaries going against the phalanx. Now they will actually break through that phalanx if they just fought, but of course they're going to attract so much attention from missile fire, it's going to damage them. But all the while, the enemy's real meat is coming onto the field, an Arachosian army and a Persian army, both in loose order, and both using lots of Greek-style units like legionaries, swordsmen, heavy pikemen we saw there. The Persians have brought a few actual Persian units, but they've also got these thorax swords, the lesser version of the legionary that we also use. They've got special units too, they have got these catapults, and they've got heavy cavalry, not so useful for a siege assault, so just waiting at the back right now, but they are going to get involved later, as well as a smattering of ranged units, peltists and bowmen. So overall, a nice powerful army coming in, and we need to get rid of these first attackers to make sure we're in prime condition to receive them. It's kind of going okay here. We've killed so many of the enemy with our ranged attacks that you can see many units shattering and fleeing from the settlement. The legionary is going to be harder to kill though. Eventually it basically came down to just those legionaries fighting against us, and Artemios actually had to come and join the fight because they were breaking through the phalanx. The garrison phalanx not all that good, so it struggles to hold against these superior units. Artemios actually coming out with sword and shield to fight on the front line against the legionaries, a very dangerous situation. So eventually I managed to get a couple of cavalrymen round behind the legionaries. This is the garrison cav, I think it's just 9 in each unit, but they both plough in, and as you can see from the numbers, they actually killed loads of the legionaries with this rear attack, so that was quite nice. I think the enemy probably had low health at this point, and that actually causes them to rout. Fantastic. So we pushed those legionaries out of the way, probably slightly disheartened by the fact their general was dead at this point, and that means the battle on this eastern front of the town is now won. You can see enemy ranged units setting up back there, so it seems they're planning to make another attack, but right now it's this attack to focus on the enemy's main force, led by their best units this time. The legionaries coming in to fight with the daemons, and javelins and arrows just raining down upon them, but as we look back we can see the sheer scale of the challenge. Just infinite troops coming in. We're basically facing a 200-man deep line against our 4-man deep line here. Absolutely insane numbers charging in to face our phalanx. They have such a heavy infantry advantage. This is going to be a real challenge to hold off. So you can see it's just a huge grind right along the line, and all over the place they've deployed their best units as well. So this is a nice assault from the enemy. On the far left-hand side of the line, unfortunately our phalanx is broken up. They had to resist the first attack from Arachosia, and now as the second army comes in, they're in trouble, and immediately we're swarmed with their Persian troops as well. Behind the daemons we've basically just got citizen militia, who of course aren't going to hold very long, so that is not ideal whatsoever. Outside the town I've got my 2 units of Celtic cav who've come out to try and do some damage. Unfortunately the enemy's cavalry reserve are actually now going to be able to be used against us, so here we see shock cav just charging across these open plains, and we are definitely going to get out the way of that. We do not want to receive that heavy shock cav, so we really want to take out these ballistae because they are just pounding our position. Their shots flying right over the huge battle going on there and falling amongst our reserves, including killing the royal hoplites of Artemios here. So very dangerous to have those catapults just firing at us like that. We need to bring them down if we can, but we'll have to see what our cavalry can do. Meanwhile, the left part of the line that broke is now being shored up by javelinmen fighting in melee and citizen militia. Really luckily, the enemy have deployed their worst troops onto that part of the line, so it's best able to hold. The downside is that the enemy's mass amounts of ranged units here are going to do tons of damage to this defending force, because having loads of javelinmen fighting in melee is not going to do anything if javelins fall down upon them. They're totally unarmed, so that's bad news. As for the main fight, well, you can just kind of see how it's going visually. Our numbers so low, we're losing men fast. Our line down to 1 or 2 men thick. The enemy still hundreds deep in their attacking formation. An absolutely hopeless situation, really. Our cavalry charging into the back, just doing nothing against these disciplined troops. They don't care about receiving a rear attack. My other cavalry unit managed to shake the enemy's shock cav and has got behind the enemy's line, so that means they are going to have a clear charge to go and take out those catapults. But the main fight's getting worse and worse. You can see more and more daemons turning away from the fight if they are not simply being killed, meaning this citizen militia line is going to have to stop the enemy from totally outflanking and destroying the rest of their comrades. Not good at all. We did manage to get that ballista though, so our cavalry will now wipe out the crew. That's going to make it easier for our reserve units to stay in reserve basically, but at this point we're not really going to be using a reserve. It's time to commit everything as the main line starts to falter. They're bringing up their ranged units now as well, so a few archer units will pepper our lines, but at this stage they'll probably do more damage to their own men than ours because our line is so thin, so not really worried about that. And bringing those pike units from the back of our formation up to the front, I don't think the enemy is going to exploit our possible vulnerability on the rear flank there, so they're going to get into this melee in just in time because it's really just going downhill. The enemy slaughtering the javelin men now, just sending in all of their trash troops to rush through this breach. They will struggle against the pikes, so that is something, but you can see they're already taking ground, almost able to rear flank the position over here, which is just holding against an enemy raid. So really, we've just got tons of ranged troops, very few heavy infantry left, and the enemy have the opposite, basically all heavy infantry and few ranged. So now Artemios, our best remaining unit, is charging onto the front line to fight with his royal hoplites against this massive horde of enemies. Those legionaries not going down easy. The pikes are going to try to protect his flank, but they're not in position in time. He's going to be rear attacked right away. His men, as you can see, well able to just cut down the Persians with ease, but against the well-trained Greek-style troops, even these royal hoplites will struggle. The daemons were there in the very beginning, when our proud city first set its sights on glory. The first blood spilt was spilt by your honoured predecessors. The daemons were there when the great Eusebius cast off his robes to don the armour of a warrior, and took him around the world, forging the legend that now rests on our shoulders. Some of you will remember Athens. Some of you will remember how the world spoke your names down to the lowest shield bearer. You are those daemons. You live and die with an invulnerable spirit. You look out at a sea of foes that ends only with the horizon, and you grin. You steady your blades. You feel the fires of Zenon, Eusebius, and General Artemios within you, and you conquer. On the edge of the settlement, some of the enemy's archers who set up to provide fire to support their attack are unfortunately for them caught by my cavalry, so we were able to defeat some units there, driving them out. Elsewhere you can see I was trying to get Cav to get around the enemy's main position, but unfortunately they had these spears ready to stop me from doing that, plus these pelters are just going to swarm in and fight my Cav in melee to stop them from getting anywhere near the backs of any of their units, which, as you can see, are currently streaming into my position. With my left flank broken, the pikes have set up in a slightly odd formation, but are just about holding off the enemy. These pikes, though, are behind Artemios, aren't doing all that much. Artemios himself fighting on the front line there in a deadly engagement. I've got 2 units of swords that I did send around to try and do a flank attack on the enemy's main bulk, but they have so many units that a flank attack just isn't possible. All it takes is for one unit like this one to come out and stop me from going around, and I can't reach the rear of the rest of their fighting units. Their heavy cav there ploughing in, they'll do okay against my swordsmen. So there's the back of the main line, no contact to be made. We're not going to get anywhere close with any of our flanking units, and that means things are just going to get worse and worse. On the eastern part of the settlement, all of the garrison hoplites are finally destroyed as the enemy's Persian troops managed to wipe them out. They didn't really exploit the advantage they gained from that. They could come and rear attack everything, but really they were more focused on killing the last 2 or 3 men there, so that's slowing them down. Now here we can see Artemios in the blue helmet, silver shield and the white plume fighting on the front line against these enemy legionaries. Deadly combat, and you'll see he just disappears. He's suddenly crushed under the enemy's advance. Artemios is killed unceremoniously in this deadly frontline melee, and that's not going to bode well for the rest of the fight. His guards are going to fight on, but you can see our morale is dropping into the yellow and red. Our army is starting to realise that it's been thoroughly outgunned by the 40 or so units that are just hammering against our 6 or so frontline units there. The pikes managing to hold on okay, especially against these lighter units like the Persian spears, but they're being rear flanked. Here you can see heavy cavalry smashing into the flank of a phalanx. The phalanx's total weakness to be attacked in the rear by cavalry. Not good at all. Since they're super well trained, they are going to keep fighting on despite fighting on all sides, but not looking good at all. So let's just have a little look at the Daemons' front line as they fight what seems to be their last battle. The number of enemies seems to be unlimited. We've got most of our skirmishing troops fighting in place of hoplites here because we've just lost all of our heavy infantry. So this line is not going to hold for long. And here we see on the far right end of our line, finally a breaking unit, the hoplites, giving way, the vast majority of them having died fighting the enemy. They just can't hold on any longer, and that's going to expose even more flanks. Our lighter units definitely not going to hold out. You can see wavering units, and our royal hoplites now wavering as well. Our best unit is about to go. It doesn't look like there's any way out of this for the Daemons of Polymus other than death. We did manage to make another cheeky attack on some of their archers at the back. The Peltas once again going in to support the melee against the cav, but that's going to make absolutely no difference. So you can see the lines have totally broken. Just a few pikes totally surrounded in the centre, fighting on. Their high stats allowing them to survive. But that's not going to be much consolation for the rest of the army, as it is slaughtered by the enemy's superior numbers, and they'll be forced to watch the Arachosian flag be raised over the victory point, which will further demoralise our troops. It seems this is finally the end for the Daemons of Polymus. So as the Massalian lion pedestal here watches on over our surviving troops being wiped out by the enemy's superior power, it seems this is finally the end of the journey for the Daemons of Polymus, setting out almost 30 years ago from the ports of Counterattack in the western corners of the known world, and finally meeting their demise in the far east. They've come a very long way, and they've won a very large number of battles since the very beginning of the campaign, but finally the Daemons of Polymus have been truly crushed, killed to the last man for the second time in their history. It is over for them. We were too late. What will the gods think of us now? Twice they saved our skins in battle, and they were the ones who drove out those stinking Caturoi from our homes to begin with. The Daemons of Polymus. Now there is only one army by that name, and my how far short it falls of the heights its name strove for. And on a practical note, the forces at play, so strong to drown Artemios, will no doubt break upon our position as well, and upon Massalia and Sarai. We could not protect our saviours, but perhaps we can protect the world that they built for us. I'll speak with the Massalian Council on it. For now, we should inform the men of what has happened. Let all drills and unneeded duties be cancelled for today. We must find time to mourn. Artemius' career is cut short as he and the Daemons are slaughtered down to the last man. So that means the council have lost one of their leading generals here. Artemios was the most powerful officer associated with the council, so this loss means that Acronius will probably take over as the council's leading commander, but he isn't particularly notable, with only a few battles under his belt and no particular conquests. So that is going to be a blow and increase the amount of power that the Timucoi has, which will also increase the chance of civil war. But the main risk in the short term is actually just going to be the fact that we now have all these hostile armies around, and we have no forces in any of our steppe territories or further west, so they can swoop and attack more of our lands if they wish. So there's the confirmation. Everyone was killed among the enemy's army. Surprisingly few losses actually. We only defeated one entire regiment, and that means the entire enemy army is just going to regenerate now that they're in friendly territory. We've done no lasting damage to our enemies with that last stand, and that's a huge shame. We saw for a second there the enemy actually created the Hordes of the Steppe as a liberated faction, so we'll see where they're going with that. The Gallic Confederation offer me peace in exchange for a very small payment, but I'm going to reject it because I haven't even begun to start trying to support my client state, the Cimbri, against the Gallic Confederation, and immediately they have another battle for me, it seems. They're attacking Ubersis in Germania. This time we have a little bit more of a chance of defending the settlement. You can see we have loads of actual hoplites and some cavalry among our ranks. The auto-resolve was bad. The enemy does have the advantage. Their army absolutely full of chosen swordsmen, some of them with experience, but also some of them damaged, and they have a decent commander leading them. So I thought I would give this one a go, because we do have the pretty standard tactic available of just using all our hoplites to block the choke points, and then using our cavalry and archers to try and destroy the enemy's melee infantry. So let's see how it goes. The battle is going to start, of course, with the enemy just running in and attacking the front of my phalanx. They'll probably win very slowly, but we're going to have a lot of time thanks to the defensive advantages of the phalanx. The enemy also bringing chariots, curiously. Those chariots just running into the phalanx, and that's not really going to do very much. The phalanx having a bonus against large units, I think that applies to chariots as well, so they're going to struggle to get through. They're probably going to die quite rapidly. At least they'll distract my hoplites from fighting my infantry for a moment. That's the only value they'll provide. So behind my positions, I'm going to have all these archers who are just going to rain arrows down onto the big blobs of enemy troops that will form up as they get bottlenecked by my hoplites. Right out here on the edge of town, I managed to stage a little ambush of the enemy's cavalry unit with 2 of my own cav. Luckily my guys are heavy, the enemies are medium, so we are going to be able to just take them down in a straight melee here. You can see the enemy almost going. My other cav unit is leaving that combat to actually come over and join this fight. Here it's enemy spearmen attacking my hoplites, much less dangerous. The spearmen will take a really long time to get through the hoplites, if they do at all, and our local archer support's going to be helping as well. The enemy does have these javelin men, those spear throwers, so we need to bring them down because they are going to be able to damage the hoplite phalanx quite quickly, and that's where my cavalry were going. So we're just going to slam into those guys. They're totally isolated, and they don't use their spears, curiously enough, in melee. They switch to short swords, so that means that unit's going to go right down, and of course killing those guys simply frees up more cavalry for me to use on the offensive. But you can already see the damage my archers have done to this unit, getting close to killing half of the enemy with these volleys. They're just going right down, so it looks like we're easily going to win this part of the battle, and when my cavalry come in, that's just going to make things confirmed for our victory. They rush in. You can see the enemy's numbers dropping so fast there, that breaks their unit. So now I have all these infantry units and missile units to take on just one local spear unit. That's definitely going to go my way as well. So we're basically going to clear up on this side of the town as more and more units become free, and we can just surround the remaining enemies. We still have to contend on the west side of the town though with the enemy's main offensive, where they're generally leading the assault, because they are actually starting to kill my hoplites now. We need to speed things up. My cavalry have come all the way around the town to take out these longbow hunters the enemy had, which had done a fair bit of damage actually firing into my phalanx, so good to get revenge on them, and they of course will be easily defeated in melee by the cavalry. So we now have cavalry outflanking the enemies on the west side of the town as well, so we just make charges, and you can see the charges quickly result in these mass slaughters of the enemy as they try and rout and are stuck between the cavalry and the phalanx. So same thing happening over here on this approach to the northern part of town, where my general was fighting, taking out 2 more units of chosen swordsmen with a cavalry hoplite sandwich going on. So easy peasy really. At this point the battle's pretty much over because we have so many units available. We can just totally surround and crush the enemy, and that really damages their morale. So the battle comes to an end in a close victory. I felt it's a little bit better than a close victory, but anyway, there's some good news to hopefully wash down the bad news of our massive defeat in the east. We have done big damage to the Gallic Confederation's army here, and that means that once our 4 armies in the area come to counterattack, we should make some progress. We'll find out next time. The coalition of eastern powers had finally found a break in Massalia's armor. A cabal of Persians, Parthians, Arachosians and steppe tribes joined the falling Hayastan Empire in attempting to repulse the creeping advance of their mutual enemy. The death of Artemios and the slaughter of the world-famous army he commanded was a blow that sent shockwaves through the Hellenistic order. With the steppe territories of the Massalian Council under threat, and the knowledge that the elite armies that had bested the Daemons could easily turn on the recovering Mesopotamian colonies, tensions among the Massalian elite rose dramatically. It was clear they needed to strangle the Eastern Coalition before it could strike again.